Hello, everyone, and welcome to Teachings of the Ascended Masters on Fallen Angels, Nephilim, and UFOs. I'm Stephen Macchio.
And I'm Joseph Macchio.
And in our last episode, there was a lot of information regarding Genesis 6, regarding the daughters of men
Yes.
and the Nephilim. And before we continue here, I just want to go through that again a little bit in some more detail.
Okay.
Because you had the Earthlings,
Yes.
you had the evolutions on our planet, and you have the daughters of men, and then we pulled in the concept of the Watchers.
Yes.
So let's just reread Genesis 6.
That's a good idea. Yeah.
And then we'll go through that a little bit more and explain what those things actually mean. Because Genesis 6 has been debated and has been talked about and misunderstood for a very, very long time. But finally, we have some clarity on the subject because of the Ascended Masters. So let's just read Genesis 6 and see what we come up with here.
The Nephilim were on the earth at that time, and even afterwards, when the sons of the gods resorted to the daughters of man and had children by them. These are the heroes of days gone by, the famous men. That's the Jerusalem Bible translation.
Okay, so we are not talking about Elohim at all. We have to make a distinction here
correct.
that when we were talking about Elohim in the last episode, we were talking about how that is a plural noun and that the Elohim have a lot to do with the evolutions of a given planet, the overseeing of it, and the nurturing of it, the creation of it.
Yes.
Is what the Elohim. Now, here we have a situation where in the book of Enoch, we have the union of the Watchers and the daughters of men producing a giant.
Yes.
Who they overrun the earth to a certain degree and even resort to forms of cannibalism. And I was saying before that there is a correlation between the tremendous power that is in a Watcher, and when they unite the seed of the Watcher with the daughters of men, you get something inhuman. It is not a normal production of a physical body that is around 5 feet, 6 feet or so.
Right.
And, you know, part of the reason here is that at the atomic level, you have the reproduction of the chart that we showed in other episodes where it showed the divine monad, the top figure, and then it showed the higher mind or the Christ as the middle figure, and then the lower figure as the evolving soul. Well, at the atomic level, you have the same pattern that holds tremendous power. And so the upper figure would be like the neutron in the atomic structure. And out of that comes the proton, which would represent the I am presence.
Yes.
Then the neutrino is the higher mind or the Christ self. And then the lower figure would be represented as the electron. And at the very core of these atomic structure is a tremendous power of the divine being who incarnates. And this is why the production of the offspring are so powerful, and they take on a physicality that is larger than life because it's trying to retain a spiritual essence, an energy that is tremendous, has tremendous power in it. You know, that's what I was trying to get at.
Yes, I understand.
And the other thing I wanted to say was that the Watchers, their whole idea of having a Watcher, which is a very exalted state, was they were placed there to oversee spiritual evolutions of various planets, and they would hold an ideal and an idea for the evolution to progress spiritually.
Like a vision.
It's right. They kind of hold, a vision for them that they will not get caught into the energy veil, that even though that there is fallen angels and things going on the planet to thwart your spiritual evolution, just by the power of their thought and them being able to hold a vision for the betterment of mankind, or those who are caught in this, those who are caught in this situation,
Yes.
they're there to help raise the evolutions all through the mind and whatever else they use. They don't necessarily need to come down into physical embodiment. So the position of a watcher is they are spiritually watching out for the evolution that's evolving and making sure that they go on the right path.
And when they saw all of these other evolutions, the daughters of men were actually genetically engineered.
Right.
So the daughters of men weren't just pretty women or voluptuous.
Right.
They could have been, but they were already genetically engineered, and the so-called earthlings probably are mechanization man.
Right.
So the watchers are looking down and saying, we have to do something about this mess. We have genetically engineered mechanization man. We have the daughters of men that have been genetically engineered. We have the regular root races, as you were saying the other time, who could be interpreted as earthlings, but we don't know the real interpretation of earthlings.
Right.
They could be the root races, or they could be the false man, mechanization man that we spoke about, that was constructed or that was engineered by Lucifer and Satan.
Right. So you could see why.
It's a mess.
Yeah. When you read that, little explanation from Mrs. Prophet, you can see why someone at that stature of a watcher could actually do what they say they could do. They could embody, and by placing the seed of the watcher with the daughters of men and with mechanization man, you can raise that evolution.
Yeah.
However, they went wrong with motive again, believe it or not.
And the thing is that why would the spiritual hierarchy, their hierarchs, give a stamp of approval to mating with the daughters of men that themselves were genetically engineered?
Right.
They would never have given their approval to that.
See, this is what's misunderstood of how things happen in the heaven world. They think that the God that is wherever they think it is makes all the decisions and says, you do this, you do that, but they don't understand the free will that exists in the heaven world. And if a group of individuals, 200 of them we specifically mentioned, go and do something, they can. It is a free will choice, but you can see where they went wrong by not getting the proper approval, not going through the proper channels, and not going up the ranks to get the dispensation to do something like that. Because there are other ways you can raise an evolution and a civilization by not doing what you're saying.
Right. That's not the way to do it.
No, that's pretty physical, isn't it? But,
I mean, they wanted to do something physical. There could have been another way to do it, and that would have come from the divine cosmic councils and the cosmic beings that run the entire universe and so forth. So it's a very interesting subject. And of course, the offspring of the watchers and the so-called daughters of men, which Genesis 6 simply says famous men, were actually giants, as you said that already, and that they overran the earth, and they actually resorted to cannibalism. So, and that's what Genesis 6 says, that after the earth is replete with the offspring of the sons of the gods, here meaning the watchers, it is stated, quote, Yahweh saw, and this is in King James, the Lord, Yahweh saw that the wickedness of man was great on the earth, and that the thoughts in his heart fashioned nothing but wickedness all day long.
See, this is a very important distinction here that I want to point out again, because I think everyone got it, but I just want to point it out again.
No, it's good to clarify over and over what...
I was always taught that the wickedness of men were us, the people that were sinners, that we were sinning to the extent where, he says what he says, that we were just sinners, wicked. But remember, in the other episodes, we refer to the word wicked as those who were the adversary. That term is not a term that's used for someone who had the divine spark, the sons of God,
And
the
children.
light bearers, the
Yeah.
children of God,
Yeah.
who are sinning
Yeah.
and have fell into various
They've gone
difficult,
astray.
karmic situations. They could go astray for many embodiments.
Yes.
They are not called the wicked.
That's
So
right.
that was a big load off of my mind. That is not, the people weren't just, sinning crazily. I mean, how bad can it get? This is a whole nother level of interference. They're really interfering
It's
with the evolutions
Yeah.
of the planet
Yeah.
by doing what they're doing here.
Right. Exactly.
So such was the legacy of the Watchers.
And and this legacy basically included, according to the book of Enoch,
Mhm.
Quote, every species of iniquity. This is quoting the book of every species of iniquity, including war, all manner of perversity, so that the quote world was altered. Does it sound familiar?
Yep. When you're altering and interfering with the normal course of the evolutions of those who are on the planet, that's a huge problem.
And there are many ways to do that.
And the karma for that is very, very, very heavy.
Very severe. But every species of iniquity, well, all you have to do is look around at the earth today and in past decades and past centuries.
Right.
And you can see that every species of iniquity was somehow or other on this planet. But now we know who's behind it.
Right. And in some ways, it is good that we don't have those memories of what happened at the time of Atlantis and before that in Lemuria. So there is a certain grace that when you embody, there's a certain veil that protects you from some of these memories.
Yes,
However, the soul remembers this. So, when we talk about these things, you may have a soul memory of these records coming up of when these things did take place. But for the most part, they're sealed by that veil of Maya, which is a good veil of Maya for each embodiment, because people are in trouble in one embodiment.
For records of their own childhood in one embodiment.
Right. This is when they were from their 4 to 35.
Yeah.
Just a few years. Could you imagine trying to remember what happened 13, 20, 50,000 years ago?
Yeah.
I don't want to remember. I'm trying to forget what I did just a few years ago. So, but it's an interesting thing how these things are all worked out.
Yeah.
That the Lords of Karma understand that you're going into a planet that has all of these problems. The soul retains the memory, but you don't have to outwardly remember it. So now let's go into the word Nephilim and that area there.
But before we do,
oh, you wanted to talk about the
I
Gnostic.
wanted to just, after we're talking about the book of Enoch and its suppressed and lost book, I just want to mention before we go into this other section that we'll be speaking about further about the Nephilim, that there are Gnostic texts that were also banned and hidden for centuries, as well as the book of Enoch. And these texts do expose false creator, false creations. I think I briefly mentioned in one of the other classes, but there's 3 texts that we're not going to discuss in detail, but just to mention them for the future, for your future reference. The first one is called The Secret Book of John. This was written during the 1st century, John being the disciple of Jesus. The Secret Book of John talks about a divine being called Sophia, which means wisdom in Greek, how she, without her consort, gave birth to and created by herself this being called Ildebaoth, which means child of chaos. And he went on, this false creator, to create archons or rulers. This is Greek, archons, rulers, and they're sometimes just called archons. But they were a false hierarchy, as in addition to the ones we're speaking of that we've already mentioned, Lucifer, Satan, and the Watchers. So for further information, on these beings, archons, and these have been judged. The archons have been judged.
Thank God.
Thank God.
We want to judge more of them. That's what we got to do.
And there's two other texts that I'm going to leave that up to you. You want to go home and do the two other texts besides the secret book of John is the reality of the archons. Sometimes the reality of the rulers. That's another Gnostic text found at Nag Hammadi, and it's part of the Nag Hammadi library. And another text called On the Origin of the World. And the world here means the world that not only began by the divine beings, but then was overtaken by the fallen beings or the archons or evil rulers. So I think if anyone wants to further investigate that, Nag Hammadi library, you can bring it up on the internet.
Yeah, so you can't get away from it. These false creations or the turn of those who are in states of they have very powerful positions.
Yeah.
Go wrong for whatever reason, and no matter what religion you look into, you will find a story of a miscreation of some sort and a fall.
Yes.
That's a parallel concept that's talked about all the time. There's always a fall, and there's always a false creation. And it's amazing how that thread goes through all of the major religions.
Yes. And speaking of the secret book of John, which I forgot to mention, this was dictated to John by Jesus himself. So the story of Sophia and Elizabeth is not all allegory. It is not fiction. It actually happened.
It's an amazing read.
It's an amazing read, right? And it's not easy, by any means.
Okay, so that's what we have on the Watchers.
Yep.
Those 200. Now we're going to move on regarding the Nephilim again with a little bit of a twist.
Yeah, because what we've been doing, we've been using the word Nephilim in the generic sense to mean the cast down ones or the cast out ones. And that is the generic term. But an author called Zachariah Sitchin, which we're going to be discussing, his particular book, says it refers to a specific group of these fallen beings. So,
right, and I think this is a case, in Sitchin's case, I think many people are probably very much aware of his books. His first book was The 12th Planet.
Yeah.
But the whole series is called The Earth Chronicles. And, this is, I think, a case where someone is remembering the Akashic record of what happened, because he and a few others were able to read these tablets, the Sumerian tablets.
Yeah.
And what he, comes forward with is astonishing. And the reason we're bringing it up is because the Ascended Masters condone parts of what Sitchin brought forward. And that's what we're going to talk about. We're not saying that every single book that Sitchin wrote is absolutely accurate, but we're going to go through the part that has been condoned by the Ascended Master El Morya, I believe, brought this forward. He brought it to the attention of the messenger Elizabeth Clare Prophet. And when an Ascended Master does that, he's doing it for a very specific reason, because the cycle is up for the evolutions of a planet to have that record come up for transmutation, for knowledge, for knowing, to having the divine knowledge of what went on this planet, so that we can do something about it.
Yes.
So his first book, Sitchin's first book, is called The 12th Planet. And of course, biblical scholars and historians, they either ignored it or they criticize it.
And they're still criticizing Sitchin to this very day.
Yeah.
This book came out in 1976. Maybe it was 78.
Yeah. But, and you find it in the science fiction section of a bookstore, or if you, we don't go to bookstores that much anymore. But
it's a new age kind of
new age science
area.
Fiction. Yeah. But they're not taking him seriously. But yet they acknowledge that there's very few people that could understand these tablets from Sumeria. But everyone knows about the Sumerian civilization and the pantheon of Sumeria. Because what's strange about it, though, is that the Darwinists and the evolutionists, they as they follow the evolution of man, you come out of the Stone Age, And then all of a sudden you have the Sumerian civilization
Very high.
they have agriculture, they have government, they have a judicial system, they have waterways, they have. So the question is how did you come out of the Stone Age and all of a sudden have an advanced civilization as the Sumerians did, but you just had stones?
Right.
You were able to maybe make an arrow.
2 weeks before you were in the Stone Age.
So what happened? It's just.
But part of that is also the fact that there's been suppression of ancient history.
Yes.
You can go to say the same thing about ancient Egypt.
Yeah.
2 weeks ago you were in the Stone Age, and all of a sudden you're building a pyramid.
You're right.
And so people don't like to know this, but the ancient Atlantean civilization and Egypt are very closely related. But all that's suppressed because of the false history that we've been reading. But that's a very good point.
Right. Right.
It's impossible, but unless it was brought here by.
Yes. So we're going to get into that.
But see, great civilizations are brought by two types. One is the divine beings, the avatars, who bring civilization from, let's say, Venus or Sanat Kumara, and all the emissaries that came to save the planet. Then there's the other group, the fallen ones, in their spacecraft, then also started civilization. So some civilizations are started by the Great White Brotherhood's emissaries, by the ascended masters, and others by the rebellious ones. We're going to start a civilization our way.
Right.
We
can do it better.
We can do it better in contradiction to your civilization. It so happens that the great pyramids of Egypt were not created by Nephilim or aliens, but in fact as a temple of initiation. We're not going to get into that, but just to show that the advanced civilizations can be started and originated by two groups.
Right. Right. That's a good point. So basically, the scenario of what Sitchin is writing about is what we're going to talk about. And, and that's what the correct area of it. And so his book claims that the biblical account of the creation of man is the work of extraterrestrials from another planet called Nibiru. And that the planet Nibiru came close to Earth's orbit around 450,000 years ago.
Yeah.
Now, the extraterrestrials are called Nephilim. And we read in Genesis 6, as it was said, that the word was translated as giants.
Yes,
And
he's actually read that.
Yes, he's saying that it was incorrect.
Right.
And that it should be translated as Nephilim, which he means to say those who fell down to earth in rockets.
Isn't that amazing?
It's a completely different account that he gets from the Sumerian tablets. So here you have a situation where my take on this is that you have a fallen evolution on this planet Nibiru.
Yes.
And it has a 3,600 year revolution from where they are to around our sun. And on that planet, they come by the solar system, and as their trajectory comes close to our solar system, they can easily get into their spacecraft and come to Earth.
Exactly. This is what Sitchin is saying.
This is basically what he's saying. They felt, he's using the term rockets, but
yeah,
who knows, what manner of craft they had.
Yeah.
So Sitchin is claiming that the biblical account that we read in the Bible, specifically with the creation of man, is taken from these Sumerian tablets.
Right. And that it is some kind right. And again, it is stating that the gods, now the Sumerian gods, created man. And where is Sumer? Well, this is present-day Iraq. If anyone wants to know, Sumer in the Sumerian civilization was in what is now known as Iraq.
Mm-hmm.
So who were the gods? Well, obviously, advanced scientists from the planet Nibiru.
Right.
And how did they do it? We're back to genetic engineering again.
Right.
And this is what Sitchin is saying. Man, quote, was created by the gods through genetic engineering. And he goes into great detail about how that was done according to the Sumerian tablets. He's not making anything up. It's not science fiction. He's looking at the tablets. He's taking them at face value.
Right.
And the birth goddesses. And I think we are going to actually be speaking of that to a certain extent, but not in detail.
Right. But you have the same situation again where certain planets could have been, the evolutions that were assigned to them, could have been there for a very specific purpose. But because of free will, they went off on a scientific bent.
Yes.
And they left any spirituality or infusing science and spirit together as two pillars.
Yes.
If you leave off the one and only go in the direction of science, you can see that this is probably what happened on Nibiru.
Yeah.
And there were also many fallen ones that were already there.
Yes. Yes.
On that particular planet. Because, why do we know that? Who was the god of... Go ahead and look at your notes. Who is the god of Nibiru?
It says here, okay, Anu, A-N-U, the god Anu was the ruler of this planet. He had two sons, and Enlil and Enki. Now, most of you know from Babylonian Sumerian mythology, quote mythology. Well, Sitchin and the Ascended Masters are saying it's not mythology. So they were all Nephilim. In other words, those who were cast down. So again, we're back with that. And now this group from planet Nibiru were all rebels, and you mentioned this. They're rebels against the spiritual hierarchy, okay? At one time, they all followed Peshualga, Lucifer. However, Sitchin knows nothing of this. He does not deal with any rebels. He does not put the Nephilim, Anu, Enlil, and Enki in the class of rebels. All he's saying is that they were advanced scientists. They came to Earth. They created man by genetic engineering, and that's where we come from, okay? This is where there is the departure from the Ascended Masters' teachings and Sitchin's theory. Only a certain portion of humanity were created in this manner by genetic engineering, and the rest were from a spiritual source, the sons of God, the children of God that came, and the bodies created by Elohim. So Sitchin does not deal at all with the spiritual aspect.
Right.
He only knows this. And so we're only going to take this from the point of view of this actually did happen. But again, Sitchin doesn't have the whole story. The Ascended Masters who revealed this to us gave us the whole story.
Right.
About the two evolutions of light, the spiritual evolutions, and the ones that were the rebellious ones that started out as light bearers, started out as great angels, and then defected and took the dark side. And we know all about the dark side.
Right. And we'll clarify this as the next episode continues. But I just wanted to say before we close here that, you know, he's reading the Sumerian tablets.
Yes.
And once again, why would the Sumerians put in there that we're the rebels, we're the ones that were cast down, we live on a fallen planet, we have fallen gods, and we're going to infiltrate the planet as we come close to the solar system, you know, with Earth, and we can easily go. They're not going to write that in their own history.
No.
Because just like in the other text that you were reading, they don't ever want to expose themselves. They want to come off as gods, lowercase g, and they do, for all practical purposes. So when we continue Sitchin's understanding and the Ascended Master's clarification of that understanding, we will see how the Nephilim interfere. Once again, we have another interference with the evolutions of Earth. Yes, it happens again.
We don't need any more, you know that, right?
Just a little bit more.
Oh, all right.
But
all right. Just a
we
little
will
bit more. You
clarify what happens to the people on Earth and another thing that they have to endure. So stay tuned for our next episode, and thank you for watching.
Thank you.